Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. Bilateral white ball cricket is back and isn't it great? Harry Brook reminds us that he's still very good, while Gus Atkinson shows that he might be even better than we thought a couple of weeks ago. Sri Lanka women beat England for the first time ever in a T20I. The Asia Cup kicked into action and the County Championship is reaching its climax. I'm Yas Rana and with me this morning is Phil Walker and Ben Gardner. It's good to be back after a week or so off.
Mate, it's good to have you back. I'll tell you that for nothing.
Feels like a slight.
You take it however which way you like, Gardner. No, not at all. Not at all. You're always a manful understudy.
But it is
man.
an understudy, yeah.
Let's start with the England-New Zealand T20s. And although the focus is all on the 50 over World Cup, it's easy to forget that in 9 months' time, Ben, there's a T20 World Cup, and England have made a significant change. Josh Buttler has moved down the order to accommodate an opening partnership of Johnny Bairstow and Will Jacks. Talk us through that change, and is it the right change?
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing to try and work out is this a permanent move, or is this just something to give Will Jacks a bit of game time, figure out how good he is, to give Bairstow a bit of time in the middle in white ball cricket, which he hasn't really had at all. I think his previous white ball international before this one was back in June 2022. That's basically when Root, Stokes and Bairstow all last played, was back then in ODI cricket. So I think I kind of hope that that's what it is. I mean, we've been through the whole Buttler. Should he be in the middle order? Should he be in the opener slot? I mean, to run over the two things, I guess the middle order role is a harder one, and Buttler can do it, and it's harder to find candidates for it. So you might think England can get more players in positions where they are good if you have Buttler down there. But Buttler is the best white ball batter England have ever had. He's one of the best T20 openers there has ever been. So you just put him in the position where he can have the greatest effect on the game, which is opening. And I think that the T20 World Cup answered that pretty conclusively, especially, if anything, with how Buttler now opens in T20 cricket. He's not the explosive come in, smash from ball one player that he maybe was at some points. He's kind of he's the perfect T20 player, and that he can be that anchor. He can bat through an innings, but he can also tee off in the power play, as we saw, I guess, in the 100 when he opened with Phil Salt. We saw it, I guess, in that T20 World Cup semi-final when he bats through and then they have that explosive finish and get over the line with loads of time to spare. So I kind of hope that that's what the plan is just give Bairstow and Jacks some time in the middle, see how good Jacks is, and then push Buttler back up when the time comes. But I can also see the logic for the other way, I suppose. And Jacks is very, very talented and will have a big role to play over the next 4 years after this World Cup finishes.
Phil, whatever the reason for the change, it does look like Will Jacks is going to get a proper run at the top of the order. Alex Hales is now retired. Jason Roy is out of the reckoning in T20 cricket. And it feels like it wasn't a very big deal that Jacks opened the batting. It's felt like an inevitability for a long time. He hasn't made his way into the 50 over World Cup squad, but this is a really seriously talented white ball player in particular who England fans should be really excited about.
Yeah, it did feel inevitable. I guess the only issue against that is that there's just so many others as well who would be likely candidates as well for that role. But Jacks has been doing it now for a while. He's obviously had a taste of Test cricket as well. They like him in the setup. He's a very level-headed, phlegmatic kind of character. He bowls as well. And it's his time, and it's been coming for probably 2 or 3 years. He's looked to be the player that we know he is. You know, we've seen it here every week at the Oval, and we've also seen it also in 4-day cricket as well. And it's worth bearing that in mind. I think he's not. We shouldn't pigeonhole him as an opening power play pyjama-clad cricketer. He's so much more than that. The 150 odd he made against Essex here last year basically iced the championship for Surrey, and he does it in all forms of cricket really. So yeah, he's a fine cricketer. It's interesting that Jason Roy is, as you say, no longer a part of the T20 side. We've seen that coming for a little while. He, as it stands, is still in that 15 for the World Cup, but the next couple of weeks are quite important for his career in the short term. Once you're gently ushered aside in one format in white ball cricket, then you become immediately quite precariously placed in the other. And be interesting to see how he goes, I think, over the next couple of weeks. There will be a bit of pressure on him, as we've said now for the last 3 or 4 weeks in a row, I don't think there'll be any changes in that World Cup squad, despite the fact that quite a few people might want there to be one or two changes. Nonetheless, for Roy's own self-esteem going into that World Cup, it's quite an important couple of weeks. Just on the Buttler question, Buttler opens in, if these were big games, if these were tournament games, then Buttler opens, I would assume, right? As Ben says, he's the most complete T20 batter in the world.
I agree. I think there are a couple
of
things.
He's just playing around, right? And understandably so. You know, if he pulls a hamstring a week before the tournament, then he wants to know who's opening the batting.
Yeah, I guess I wonder if other players are in positions that suit them better with Buttler at 5 or 6, in that Harry Brook gets to bat at 4 rather than 5 or 6, and Bairstow, who briefly did really well in the middle order, hasn't done as well there recently, and it is a brilliant T20 opener. So it might be that other players you get the best out of other players if Buttler is slightly low down. But yeah, I mean, Buttler is, he averages 50 and strikes 150 and strikes 150 in T20I cricket whilst opening. He's probably the best T20 opener ever.
Yeah, I guess the other question, I suppose, in terms of Will Jacks is if Buttler is to make that move back up, actually, who is it that moves down or misses out? And I think that Jacks has quietly had a pretty excellent series, really. I mean, he's got off to 2 really, really fast starts and 1 quite fast start. And actually, I think Jos Buttler will see that and think, that's actually what I'd quite like in an opening partner. He really, really enjoyed batting with Phil Salt in the 100 because he had that intent that even kind of outsizes Buttler's intent to an extent. And Bairstow, obviously, Bairstow is brilliant. He's only, a shade lower than Buttler in England's overall white ball pecking order, I guess. But he hasn't quite nailed T20I cricket. You look at his numbers, you're like, oh, that's not quite as sort of all compelling as I thought it might be.
But I think that covers a lot of period where he hadn't established himself.
Yeah,
and actually, but in the last 5 years, he has been brilliant.
And when's the next? Sorry, Ben. When's the next World Cup?
That's the start of next summer, sort of May 2024.
I thought so. Whereabouts?
In the USA and West Indies.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I guess Bairstow, because he had that time at number 4, and he did have some statement innings, but I think there was still the feeling that he didn't quite nail that as he could, and that's why he was slated to move back up for that World Cup when he then breaks. I think it was the day after the squad announcement that happens, and so I wonder if because Bairstow is he can be very explosive, but equally he's not quite. It's different teeing off from ball 1 in ODI cricket and teeing off from ball 1 in T20 cricket. It actually looks quite different. Scoring 110 the power play in ODI cricket is that, and it's not that in T20 cricket. And actually, I wonder if Buttler will think, what I want alongside me is someone who can properly smash it, give me just the first 5 balls to get set, then I know I can carry through. And maybe that's where we see Bairstow, and that logic comes back where we think we know he's such a brilliant player of spin and white ball cricket, and he can then maybe move back into the middle order. That might be what they're thinking as well. And there could be, I mean, Bairstow's played a brilliant innings this series as well, but in a very different way to Jacks. It was, an 89 off 60. That's if you have 2 openers who are kind of aiming to do that, that can be a tiny bit of an issue. And I wonder if England will look at that and think, actually, we want a proper all guns blazing guy alongside Buttler at the top.
That 80 from 60 still upstaged by Brook at the other end.
Well,
he made 60 off 30, and all eyes were on him, despite the fact that Bairstow was doing his thing at the other end.
Well, we talked a lot over the last few weeks about what England should do. Phil just said that he doesn't think England will make changes. Ben, do you think there's a chance that Brook ends up in the 15?
Well, I mean, in a way, he's kind of only got.
You didn't listen to the show last week, did you? You were punting down the Seine in
I was actually pootling down the Canal du Midi, which is slightly different.
Sure, whatever. Anyway, we've done this, but let's do it again.
I mean, in a way, he's kind of only got 1 more innings, right? He's got that the final T20, which will maybe have happened by the time that people listen to this show, and then that could be it for Brook for the next 3 months basically until England go to the West Indies after the World Cup.
It's a travesty.
Yeah, if anything, I just wish that they would add him to that ODI squad and get him 2 games at number 4 and kind of just see what he can do, and also test a few combinations there, because I think England have really settled on what they want their 11 to look like, and I am not quite sure it's the right thing. Basically, people focus a lot on Milan, which I guess if you're looking for a spare backup batter, I can understand, but actually one of the things that squeezed out Brook is that they feel they need to have Livingstone and Moeen in that 11, and I think that looks batting light, and I wonder if they can get the overs from Root and even Stokes. Nobody says he's going to be a specialist batter, not going to bowl much, but is Stokes really not going to bowl at all? Is he going to get through 4 overs in 5 games over the course of 6 weeks? That seems possible, right? He bowled in the Ashes a little bit, and he will have had a long time to rest before that World Cup. If you can get through 6 overs per game between those two, then that's actually more than they got from their sixth bowler in 2019. And that, if you just think about what that top six looks like with Brook in it versus Livingstone or Moeen at number 6, it's worlds apart.
Yeah, and also I wonder how much further ahead Livingstone's bowling is to Root's, and I feel like England are placing a lot of emphasis on the answer being there's quite a lot of a difference. And
I think his stroke of genius is that he obviously sends it away from the bat, depending on whether he's bowling to a lefty or a righty. It's very clever. He's carved out a very good niche for himself in this setup, and I understand entirely why he's in that squad. But the point that Ben makes about the lightness, the flimsiness of the middle order, if you just run it down the line and imagine that you're playing in a big game and it's on a slightly juicier pitch than normal, and England lose 2 or 3 up top, then you are looking at a middle order potentially of Moeen and or Livingstone. And if England are 4 down for 150, then they're there in 20 overs anyway. You've got 30 overs to bat. Neither of those players are clutch players, especially if you're in a run chase. Neither of those players would you back, would you hang your hat on. They're not ice cold players. You know, they're touch players and they're explosive players, and that's great, fine. But to me, that feels like a very precarious and open and hollow middle order, potentially. To not have the best young batsman in the world in your setup, in your 15, to me is increasingly staggering. For what it's worth, and I know people keep saying, how do you fit him in? You're arguing over apples and pears here because he's a middle order and the middle order is already sewn up. You know, cards on the table, I would have opened him in the next 4 ODIs alongside Bairstow, and I can guarantee he'd have made 2 scores. And then suddenly the discussion over where he fits in is pretty much redundant. The best middle order players always bat in the top 3 in ODI cricket, and a lot of them bat in the top 1 in ODI cricket. You think of Mark Waugh moving up, you think of Tendulkar moving up. There's
Gilchrist,
with Gilchrist, there's any number of examples. Bairstow is a perfect example right there. People will say, well, Brook, you know, he's going to throw his hands at a few outside off stump. Fine, to begin with. Secondly, his judgment is good and his defensive technique is sound. Thirdly, the ball doesn't swing that much. Fourthly, you remove your second slip after 4 overs anyway. So this notion that he would be ill-equipped to deal with the new ball in the first 15, to me, is hokum, but we won't see it. And, you know, for me, it's a misstep, but I understand what they're doing. It just feels a bit conservative. That's
all. I think conservative is the right word. I think quite often selectors fall into the trap of not going about selection as who are the best 11 or 15 players right now. They actually start, the question is who does or doesn't deserve to be dropped, and it feels like they've gone about it that way rather than starting with who are our best 11 players,
or also who might we want to drop. I think if Roy was in like in Roy's best form, and you were thinking the only way he's going to drop if he hasn't, okay, maybe anyone can have an absolute stinker, but that's like you can't really count for that. And if he gets injured, fine, we bring someone in. So if Roy had an absolute stinker and he was in perfect form, they think, okay, in that worst case scenario, but that's quite remote, you know, we push Butler up, we push Moeen up, we push Stokes up. But they're actually, I think, hedging their bets quite a lot more, which is why they want that backup to be a proper top order player, because they're actually thinking like there's a reasonable chance that after 6 games we actually want to make a change, and that's the other bit of conservative thinking as well, I guess.
On Phil's point on Livingstone, I feel like England are putting a lot on him here, and he's a relatively inexperienced 50 over player. He's, although been around the setup for 2 or 3 years now, he's not actually played that much, and his style of play really suits T20 cricket. You know, T20 cricket holds occasional explosiveness in esteem, but in ODIs, if you're going to be a number 6 who bowls a lot, you're going to have to get through 7 to 10 overs most games, and also you need to be adept at coming in after 20 overs as well as coming in after 45 overs. And I feel like it's the next few weeks could also be really important for him as well, because England look like they want the balance of Livingstone at 6, Moeen at 7, all the other way around. But I feel like quite quickly they could realise that doesn't work for them, in a similar way that in 2019 they made a decision mid-World Cup on Moeen. I feel like those 2 players are similarly vulnerable this time round.
Yeah, it could also just be the making of him as well. You know, clearly he has an immense amount of talent, and that it's not just because he's their mate, right? You know, they're not indulging him. But you're right, he becomes the fulcrum of the team in some respects, because he'd be expected to bowl in the pressure cooker of Indian pitches, etc., shortish boundaries, not much turn initially, at least, and be the man, be the finisher. Now, you know, he's got some decent players in front of him who might do the job for him more often than not. But as we said earlier, if you do get blown away by a Shaheen or a Jasprit or a Mitchell Starc or whoever, and you need to rebuild, often when push comes to shove in 50-over cricket, still historically, it's the 80 off 75 not out with 4 fours and a lot of clever manipulation of field and manoeuvrings of positions. They're the innings that win games in the real pressure cooker situations. Is Livingstone capable of that kind of knock? Well, perhaps he is. It's just that there's not that much of a sample size to suggest that he does have that in his locker just yet. Because he is so extraordinary at hitting balls over ropes, perhaps it's unfair. Perhaps he's unfairly categorised as only being able to do that. But he doesn't strike me as a sort of cold-blooded killer of a finisher at all. And certainly Moeen, for all that we adore him, with good reason, he's not a finisher, and he never has been. So, you know, it is a gamble. It's a big gamble.
I guess the comparison that will give England hope is that Livingstone is a similar profile of player to Glenn Maxwell, who has been a number 6 in ODI cricket and a very successful number 6 in ODI cricket. So that type of player can work.
Yeah, and I guess one of the peculiar things about Livingstone is I think it's fair to ask questions about, you know, his innings building capabilities and that sort of thing. But when he sort of first came into sort of cricket's consciousness, okay, there was that 300 against Nantwich or whatever, but after that, it was as a test prospect, right? Like when he first comes into the England team, or the England squad, it's for that 2018 tour of New Zealand, and he had a really brilliant first class record for Lancashire for a while, and he kind of just hasn't played any of that recently. But I guess England will kind of, maybe they're looking a bit, it's a long time ago, but it's not as if this guy has never built, you know, an innings of substance. If there was 100, I think, for England A against Sri Lanka that was properly gritty, properly sort of like backs the wall, all sorts of tough conditions, and he nailed that. And they might think that, okay, if we give this guy the backing at number 6, actually, or at number 7, that actually we can kind of pull that out of him again, even if we haven't seen it for the last few years. I suppose that'd be the positive way of looking at it.
Gus Atkinson has been impressive. He took 4 wickets on debut, 2 wickets in his second game, and I was actually more impressed by his performance in the second game because of how all the bowlers around him were going at 15s pretty much. In terms of matches played, Ben, he's still very new to the professional game, and we knew he could bowl quite quickly, but it's actually a very different thing to hold your nerve at the death, because that's something that he just hasn't done that much of, and he's done it quite impressively against good players, albeit only in 2 games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where you just want that confirmation, basically, that this guy is, I mean, yeah, is maybe slightly better than we thought, but at least isn't going to be cowed by the international stage. That was kind of the last question he had to answer, because if you can bowl, you know, as fast as he can bowl, and you can get it anywhere sort of straight, then you're going to be a pretty tricky proposition.
I love this celebration for his first wicket, just sort of just a slow clap.
Yeah. He's a pretty cool character. And yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say. I mean, yeah, the death thing is good, and I guess England, maybe if he can bowl at the death and he ends up getting into that World Cup 11 somehow, that could free up Mark Wood, say, to be a middle overs option, which can be quite an attractive thing for England as well. If you have bowlers who can bowl in all 3 phases, then it really just gives you loads of options as a captain, and Atkinson might just be that, and that's quite exciting.
Other bit of news this week is that Brydon Carse has been added to England's ODI squad for that series against New Zealand. And Phil, I was thinking that I can see a way of him getting into that final World Cup squad. He's not played loads for England. He was very good in that first T20 against New Zealand. But he's probably the bowler who's most similar in profile to Liam Plunkett, which is obviously a role that England really valued up until the 2019 World Cup. And also his batting has come along loads in the last year. Look yesterday, he averages more than 30 with a bat in first class cricket.
Made runs at the start of last year as well.
Yeah. And
180 in 4-day cricket.
And his domestic T20 batting numbers are actually pretty good. So he's played, I think, 9 ODIs, and he's done decently against decent opposition. And he does offer something just slightly different to what England currently have in that squad. So again, real opportunity for him over the next few weeks to stake a claim for a place in that 15-man squad.
I've been a fan of his for a while. I saw him I saw him bowl live a couple of years back at Essex, and he's a real athlete. And you can absolutely see why they like him, because he can field, as you say, he can bat, and he's got a bit of pace about him as well. He's a natural T20 50 over cricketer. And then I wouldn't be surprised if you see him in the big stuff as well at some point down the line. He's obviously had his injury problems, but he fits the profile, doesn't he? It makes sense that they would like him. You know, he's a dynamic, young, strong, wardrobe-shouldered kind of cricketer, and he looks the part. He looks like an international cricketer, and he has enough pace. He has a very good short ball as well. And again, it's a good comparison with Plunkett. It does a sort of unsexy middle overs, but they're critically important because you can always potentially winkle someone out as well as hold up a degree of control. And he has this surprise bouncer that comes out of nowhere. So look, it's funny though, because you can just talk all day. You can talk all day about these options. There's probably more options in the top order batting side of things than there are in the seam bowling options. But even so, they're just coming out of everywhere, you know. And it's just an extraordinary time for English cricket. Simon Doull on the New Zealand, very good New Zealand commentator, he was saying that in all his years of watching English cricket and coming in and out of it as well, touring over here with New Zealand side, he said he's never seen anything like this level of quality across the board in English cricket. It's a golden age for English cricket. I mean, that comes with all kinds of amusing caveats, because if you were to listen to certain people, then the game's falling in on itself. And
well, listen to us 6 months ago, probably, but
perhaps, perhaps.
But I mean, in terms of quality of players, it's a good point. You know, we were talking yesterday here. Sorry, we get to watch a lot of Jamie Smith, and trust me, if you've not watched him, he looks class. He will play for England one day. But it's not immediately clear how he fits in over the next 3 years because of how many middle order options they have. And you know, he's only a couple of years younger than Ollie Pope and Harry Brook. And he might get a chance in the Ireland ODIs that are coming up if England seek to use that series as an opportunity to test out new players. But in terms of long-term slots in the England team, I can't remember a time when it's actually this hard to get an opportunity. In almost anything you do. I guess the only area is spin. I think if you're a really top young spinner coming through, I think you'd get a lot of opportunities. And you're seeing Rahan Ahmed getting the opportunities he's getting now at such an early point in his career. That's probably the only area where England don't have lots of backup in at the moment. Just
as an aside on that, just heartening to see Matt Parkinson in the wickets for Durham earlier in this week. Durham, obviously champions-elect and running away with it again in this current round of fixtures, but he took 4 for 50-odd. Saw some highlights, bowled beautifully. He's off to Kent next year.
And he's had a weird situation where he's been kind of on loan at Durham for some games, and then he was on loan at Kent for the One Day Cup, and has gone back on loan for Durham for the run-in. And then next year, his twin brother, Callum Parkinson, is off to Durham while he's off to Kent. But he also bowled nicely for Kent in the One Day Cup, and I think tweeted saying, great to be back feeling as good as I have in a long time, basically, and that's what it's felt watching him as well.
Yeah, look, it's just good. The kid's got to play, hasn't he?
Gulliver's Sports Travel are inviting you to explore India and experience the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup 2023 this October and November. Be part of the action with one of their tours that include guaranteed official tickets, accommodation, stadium transfers, flights, and more. To find out more information, visit their website at gulliverstravel.co.uk or call them on 01684 878 937. Before we move on to Ben's moment of the week, our first ever live show is in just 2 days' time. So on Thursday evening in Victoria in London. There are a handful of tickets still going. So if you're in the London area, get involved. So the main ticket includes a 2-part live show with us lot, Ollie Robinson and Mark Butcher. It also includes a curry and a welcome drink. And because of complicated licensing laws, I don't really understand. You can't buy additional drinks on the day. So there's a separate additional drinks package you can also buy. The weather is set to be glorious. There's a nice terrace area where we'll be meeting at the start. We're raising money for the charity, The Passage, that seeks to end homelessness. And it's going to be a proper kind of end-of-term vibe as we look back on an amazing summer and head to what promises to be an amazing World Cup as well. Anything more to add from you two?
Well, I'm just looking forward to hearing about Phil's slightly scurrilous Essex youth career, which he might give us a the tale of, or maybe not. I don't know.
We're not recording that show, are we?
We are not recording that show.
And mobile phones in a box when you turn up.
No one is allowed to record anything whilst we're there. So
Let's
maybe
see how it plays out then.
Yeah, we'll have a go.
Shut up, Gardner.
Moving on, Paul Ross. I'm on my way back from Chelmsford, and I have to say that was the worst performance by an England women's side since I started following them in 2017, and I include the time that England got perried at Canterbury. I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, given her poor form at domestic level, what on earth was Izzy Wong doing in that team? She clearly has no form or confidence at the moment. Playing her seems like gross mismanagement. Secondly, you could chalk this performance down to inexperience, which leads to an interesting observation. Between Sarah Glenn and Amy Jones, there were no players aged between 25 and 29. There is a clear missing generation of English cricketers, and I'm wondering if you have any insight as to what happened to the players of that age. Ben, you were in Chelmsford the other day as England lost Sri Lanka for the first time ever in a T20I, and it wasn't just a defeat, it was a thrashing. Sri Lanka won by 8 wickets with 7 overs remaining, and whilst there are a couple of new faces in that Sri Lanka side, it's not a brand new side. There aren't that many young superstars. Atapatu's still brilliant, but this is an England side. It's not a full strength England side, but that's not a good result.
No, not at all. And I think the listener's right that one of the worst England performances in living memory, really.
What was so bad about it? I haven't seen anything.
Well, I mean, as Heather Knight put it, everyone just had a bad day at the same time. I guess it's that when you look at the relative stature of the two teams and how badly England got beaten, and I guess the bigger worry, I suppose, from the game, we'll get on to Izzy Wong, but in a way, the bigger worry should be England's playing of spin, which is kind of for quite long been a little bit of an Achilles heel. If you go back recently to the Ashes, obviously they were undone by Ash Gardner in the Test match, and in the 2 white ball games they lost, I think Jess Johnson and Alana King were the most influential bowlers in those 2, and they've I don't think they've ever won a tournament in the subcontinent. Their wins have come outside of their spin is their weakness, and this was just an example of that. I think Sri Lanka bowled 17 overs of spin in the game, and it was at Chelmsford, which we know we'll get onto later, I guess, that it aids spinners. So I guess when you're looking at it, it was just that they were, to some extent, they were just outplayed. Sri Lanka did play really well. They do have good spinners, and if you get a total that's not much above 100 and Jamari Atapatu gets away, then there's not much you can do. So you do have to give credit to Sri Lanka.
And the next World Cup's in India as well.
Yeah, and Atapatu is in the form of her life. And as a side note, it's bizarre. She keeps getting snubbed in all these franchise pickups. The WBBL draft just happened and she couldn't get a pickup. And she's one of the best players in the world right now. It's a very odd situation. But yeah, England, the thing is, it was a very, very bad day for England. But I don't think there's much reason to think it's too much more than that, because that can happen in T20 cricket. Sri Lanka are, historically not that strong a side, but they're not so weak that, they have occasionally run through sides. It happened in the T20 World Cup in 2020, I think, where they might have run through New Zealand and then still lost that game, but that's what happened. So I don't know if there's too much to read into it. And in terms of the lost generation, you actually kind of see that across all sports. If you look through the England's men's side and you look for there's a big crop of young players. They've got that massive pool of players who are just past 30 now, sort of route upwards through Butler and Moeen and Bairstow and Stokes and loads. But actually there is a bit of a gap just in general between the ages of sort of 25 and 29 across quite a few sports, which is just a weird thing. I don't know what's happened there across the globe. So I think that sort of highlights the inexperience, and also I guess added to that is the fact that England are bringing so many more cricketers through now that the pool of players, you're going to be bringing through players who are younger. You're not going to be bringing through as many sort of 27-year-olds now who are going to be pushing for international honours. So that means that England's pool of likely new players is skewing younger. And then when you rest, I guess fair enough to rest the likes of Natseva Brunt, sort of resting Tammy Beaumont. Sophie Atkinson was going to be rested, but then injured her shoulder. Sophia Dunkley as well. Then the players are going to pick a younger, and maybe there's a bit of inexperience, but equally, hopefully they'll be better for it. So I don't think there's too much reason to worry apart from that playing of spin. The Wong thing was bizarre, because we thought we knew coming into the series that she was going to be with the squad, but essentially a non-playing member of it. John Lewis spoke before the series saying that she's really struggling for form and for confidence. Really low on that. We could do two things. We could say this is a player who's not really ready at the moment, so we'll just sort of leave her to sort of to sort of flounder in domestic cricket, or we keep her close to us and keep her working with us. None of that suggested that she was anywhere remotely close in contention. It's just they wanted to keep her around the group and have her work with Matt Mason, especially. Heather Knight was asked quite a lot about Wong after the game, and one of the things she said was that maybe there have been too many voices, and I guess that's something that women's cricket have had to deal with so much. And now with the expansion of the professional game, you will have more coaches that are talking to players, and you need to pick and choose which advice to take. And maybe the suggestion there was that Wong had taken the wrong advice earlier in the season, and then she was now having these run-up issues. And we saw these at times during the 100 when she barely bowled. She bowled 30 balls in 5 games, I think. At times it wasn't just that she was bowling badly, it was actually that she was overstepping sometimes by a quite big amount, and that's like something's going wrong there for that to happen. Like mechanically, it's not just that you're out of form, it's that something you've almost forgotten in a sense how to run up. So when she was named in the team sheet, you sort of think, oh, maybe it was kind of like a quick fix, that it was a form thing, that actually it was just like there was something wrong sort of in her thought process, and once you correct that, actually she just gets back to it. Like it's not out of the questioning that could have happened, and that seemed like the only explanation for her to be in that team sheet. And then when she's brought on to bowl, and after one ball you're like, that's not at all what's happened. They've just picked her, even though we know all these things about her. Basically, the first ball was a big no ball, also a bad ball down the leg side, hit away for 4. Funnily enough, the free hit, she then takes a wicket, but it doesn't count. Then the next ball, another no ball, then takes a wicket off the next free hit. Then she bowls a wide later in the over. So she ends up bowling a 10 ball over to start, 3 no balls and a wide, and then is brought back later in the game and starts with a full toss, which gets pumped for 4, and then a wide long hop, which gets pumped for 4 as well. And then the game's pretty much done at that point, and she's sort of, yelling at the sky in anguish. Knight was saying after the game they wanted to sort of get some context for where she was at, and that she trained quite well in the past couple of games. And more than England's squad selection, that I think shows perhaps a lack of respect for Sri Lanka, lack of respect for the fans who were there, and lack of respect for international cricket to an extent. I mean, this isn't the place where you fact find about Wong. That's what practice sessions are for. Is it
not? I mean, I actually thought it's not. I don't think it's that big a deal that she played personally. I think that she's had a bad game, so what? And she's also a player who thrives on the big occasion, and this was potentially an opportunity to allow her to improve in an environment that she actually quite likes. And then also, in terms of your point of what international cricket is, I mean, we're literally talking about this Ireland series coming up. They play more cricket than they used to. Everyone does, and you do use some series to blood in new players. I don't have an issue with England not picking their best side every moment.
Yeah, no, me neither. And blooding new players is completely fine. It's more picking a player who is out of form, out of rhythm, and who, maybe England just got it wrong and thought she was back after she'd bowled, a couple of good spells in the nets. But it's more. Thing is, it's not just a bad game. Basically, is that this has been a bad few months for Wong. England know where she's at because John Lewis said it before the series, and we've seen that throughout the summer, really, when she has played, and yet they chose to pick her basically just as a complete punt. It would almost be like, almost when Stephen Finn was kind of unselectable, as was said in 2013-14, if England just picked him for one of those ODIs anyway, when he, was completely out of that form and rhythm. And, Heather Knight also said that, Izzy Wong's she's a resilient character and that sort of thing, which is fine, but seems a bit strange to test that so sort of publicly, when it seems like what would be best is just for her to be working on this properly, making sure she has got that run up sorted and is then back in, rather than just testing it every so often in an international game when she's not got it fixed, I think.
The England-Sri Lanka series is the first to see the women's side paid the same match fees as the men's setup. This does not mean they are paid equally overall. The men's contracts are generally worth much more, but it's a step in the right direction. It's also enacting one of the many, many recommendations from the ICEC report that we talked about earlier in the summer. Phil, the county championship is back. It's entering its final stages. We're in the middle of a round as we speak, so we can't be too definitive about a lot, but there are a couple of significant storylines to pick out. Starting in Division 1, Surrey are marching towards the title. They have beaten Warwickshire by an innings in just over 2 days, which means that even if Essex beat Middlesex they would have extended their lead to at least 18 points with 2 rounds to go. They were very good again. Folk scored 100. Smith looked really good. Warren and Roach were as good as they have been all summer. You're quite downbeat about Essex's chances. I think they've still got a chance. Surrey have to play Hampshire in the last game of the season, and Essex are on a bit of a roll themselves.
Yeah, but Surrey will win comfortably. They play Northants in 2 weeks' time at the Oval, and the pitch will again be perfectly suited for their 5-seam bowling attack. They play on a different plane and level to everyone else anyway. They'll almost certainly beat Northants, who are in a relegation scrap themselves, depleted. And even if Essex were to win their 2 games, they're in the midst of a game at the minute against Middlesex, up in it as it stands. Then Surrey would need to collapse against Hants in the last week and get basically no bonus points and get turned over and beaten heavily. With Essex, of course, winning all 3 of their games, including the current one that they're playing. So the chances of it are pretty slim. It's a 10-1 chance at best for Essex. From Essex's point of view, they couldn't have done much more. You know, they started slightly slowly, and you just can't afford to do that against the Man City of English cricket. The slight irritation, I suppose, from an Essex perspective is that they were up in the game against Surrey, and such is the vagaries of this division that sometimes you only play each other once, which is a nonsense. But let's not get stuck down that rabbit hole of talking about schedules and all the rest of it.
Well, the exact same thing happened last year. I mean, it was Joe's bugbear all season.
Yeah,
Surrey and Hampshire only play each other once,
yeah,
and they're the top 2 teams.
But he's right. If he had any hair, he'd be tearing it out. It's a silly situation. But Essex were up in that game. They weren't necessarily going to win it, but they were certainly up in it. And then the rain came. It's just a shame, right? The 2 best sides in the country, comfortably, really. Warwickshire were the only other team with a mathematical chance. They got blew away in 6 and a bit sessions at the Oval. It's just a shame that they don't have a game against each other down the pipe. You know, it would have been a real classic. Essex have done really well to hang on to Surrey's coattails, but they are a monster of county cricket. And while I think we had a question about it actually on Twitter, and while it was a good one, because we are right to laud their business model, and we are right to thank them for the job they do to elevate the standards in English cricket, and the production line continues to bear fruit. Nonetheless, 19,000 of the 60,000 members in the country are Surrey members. So just run that again. 1/3 of all county members across the country are Surrey members. And that, of course, is driven in part because you get preferential treatment in the grasp for Test match tickets and ODI tickets at the Oval, which is the best ground in the country, the most populous ground in the country as well. And so the advantages that they have are legion before you put together a brilliant system run by Stewart and controlled by Batty, and with an endless supply of good cricketers. They continue just to bring through extraordinarily talented cricketers, and they are structurally, economically, and their playing staff as well, they are playing a different form of the game. And it's up to the rest, and it's up to the big dogs, really. It's up to the Lancashires and the Warwickshires and the Knottses, these that have these big time clubs that have the economic heft to at least imitate Surrey. It's up to them, because otherwise you are looking at a stage of serious dominance.
With the Man City example, obviously there's a lot about Man City that Surrey don't have. But where I think that example is fair is that you have 2 teams that have a financial advantage, I guess, but also they are so well managed.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, they're so well managed.
It wasn't out the side of my mouth, right? Forget who bloody owns Man City.
Yeah.
We're not talking about petrodollars and state-run football clubs. We're talking about a setup where you have clearly identified players in identifiable roles, and they're interchangeable depending on injuries, depending on England call-ups, and obviously with City they play in all the competitions and they want to win them all. Surrey have a similar approach. They have cricketers who are international quality cricketers who are on certain contracts where they don't feature in red ball cricket, and vice versa.
Well, in the Championship, it's
but they
players
also
like,
pick out really good players. Jordan Clark is a great example.
But their leading wicket takers are Jordan Clark and Dan Worrell, two guys who don't play international cricket, who aren't that close to playing international cricket, yet are two of the best bowlers in the country. And actually, to identify that is really skillful, and other counties don't do that. If you're comparing them to the other counties' test match venues, the other counties haven't managed to recruit as well. You look at someone like Cameron Steele, for example, is someone who wasn't a starter elsewhere, and he comes to Surrey, and his role is he is the Will Jacks replacement. That is his literal job. Is when Will Jacks is playing for England or in the IPL, then he plays bat 7 and bowl spin. They're very, very good at identifying exactly what they need. We've criticised them before for how they are reluctant to use specialist finger spinners. They have two very good ones here that they just haven't used all season.
Well, not anymore, because Moriarty's
gone, sure, but it's something that's worked. It's going to get them most likely 2 championships in a row, and it's a brand of cricket not a million miles off what England have done with 5 seamers.
The concern from a competitions perspective, and I guess this is where the City comparison bears fruit. It's hard. It feels like there's one club and then the rest, and that the rest are perpetually fighting for second place, really. And perhaps that's being unfair. I don't know, but it feels like Surrey they just have a system in place that is incomparable to all the rest. And as we saw, Warwickshire here, at the start of the season, you'd probably say they're the 3rd or 4th best side in the country. They have a couple of injuries. They missed their opening batters in this round of games. They have a couple of injuries, and their overseas Hassan Ali, who started the season well, wasn't involved. But they're playing a different game to what we saw here, and it was men against boys stuff. And once you scrape away the surface for most clubs, and this would apply to Essex as well, and it would apply to Notts as well. Once you scrape away that top level, and with England call-ups and injuries, then the drop-off is dramatic, but with Surrey it isn't. It's remarkable what they've done, really. And as you say, you run through that team and you just think of the players who aren't playing in that 4-day team that we've just seen who could have been. Reece Topley is still a 4-day player at certain times. Sam Curran, obviously. Will Jacks isn't playing. Help me out, because
Ollie Pope, Gus Atkinson
isn't playing. Gus Atkinson's with England. That's 5 players, 5 internationals right there. And that's half your team straight away. They've got a brilliant Indian starlet on the bench. They just do things on a different level, really, to everybody else. And while it's not absolutely perfect, Rory Burns has struggled with the bat. Dom Sibley's had an okay return. They lack perhaps a little bit of top order runs in the absence of Pope, who's obviously been injured and then with England. But overall, they are intimidating to the rest, and they are putting something in place that could last for a long, long time. A long, long time.
The question, I guess, right, is why have Warwickshire and Lancashire, why don't they have 10,000 members each or whatever? With considering they host test matches every year, what is it about Surrey that is it just that Surrey are that well run and Lancashire and Warwickshire are merely run decently? Is it the London thing? I guess that's the thing.
The London thing is significant.
I guess
You've
maybe
got a
it's just
population of 10 million, and they've made it the go-to cricket experience that isn't really expensive is to come into the Oval, and they price things really well. If you're under the age of 25 or 26, a membership at Surrey is really good value for money. You get a lot of cricket for not that much money. So they've managed that smartly, and I guess that is partly a London advantage. You have a population that is relatively interested in cricket, and you've got an enormous population. And also, the academy is producing just brilliant cricketers recently. It's so that when you have all these England call-ups, Jamie Smith comes in when Ollie Pope plays for England. Gus Atkinson comes through. When Gus Atkinson goes through, you've got Tom Laws behind him. It's a proper production line.
And that's where the money tells as well, because there is a salary cap in place in county cricket. I don't think any counties are actually that close to it, but Surrey aren't. Their salaries aren't, massively more than other counties. It is everything else. That they have incredible facilities here. They can, pay for coaches at all these levels, and that is what enables that pathway to progress. What attracts cricketers here, and that is almost where you feel the money more than actually on the field, I think, in some ways.
Moving on to a very different success story, Ben. Leicestershire, despite their troubles holding on to players, holding on to key talent, are a few weeks away from what could be an incredible season. So they're into the One Day Cup final and have a very decent chance of winning promotion. They're going well in the current round of games at the moment.
Yeah, it could be a real thriller, actually, that Gloucestershire game. I guess they are probably just about... They're not, Worcestershire are favourites to go up, I guess, along with Durham, who are obviously runaway leaders, but Leicester have a chance. And it is remarkable. I mean, both those stories are remarkable, but Leicester's for their One Day Cup success, considering all those players that they've lost. And in a way, you can actually almost forget how many it is, because it feels like they got that business done quite early, in a way, with Parkinson leaving, with Wright leaving as well, isn't it? And Ackerman,
yeah.
I mean, those are three big losses, and I'd be interested to hear from Leicestershire. I mean, I guess maybe they wouldn't be so honest about it, I don't know, but how much they are they secretly kind of hoping maybe build next year for promotion, perhaps, and this might come a season too early, and then you go up and you have a season where you get beaten in 9 games, and then you're back down, and all your players are out of form, and then all of a sudden you're back down the bottom of Division 2, rather than finishing third and having a lot to build on. Because as much those players have left, there is still stuff to build on. Ben Cox is a pretty canny acquisition they've got coming in for next season. Rishi Patel looks a really, really good young player. Josh Hull, I think, is a teenager and is a 6'7" left arm seamer, which you don't get many of. And I guess at some point they will lose Rian Ahmed for most of the summer, but that's not.
He's not really played that much. He had an important role as a batter for the first bit of the season, but with the ball, he's not. His bowling isn't why they're potentially second in the league.
No, yeah, but looking to the future for Leicestershire, there might well be a few seasons where they get Rian Ahmed just before he properly establishes himself with that England team, and they've got him on this really long contract. So there's lots of reasons to be excited there, and yeah, considering the season they've had as well, with Paul Nixon leaving as coach halfway through, James Taylor and Alfonso Thomas kind of dual head coach at the moment to mastermind that One Day Cup campaign, which is a real sort of team effort. I think they only had 3 individual centuries across the whole group stages, but lots of half centuries. That young and old new ball partnership is a really nice one as well. Yeah, it's a great story, and I guess from a neutral point of view, hope they turn over Hampshire in that One Day Cup final.
My moment of the week is from the Middlesex Essex game. It's Josh De Care's 7th. So De Care's the son
8th
of
now.
8th.
Yeah.
The son of Michael Atkinson, who made his way into the Middlesex side as a batter, but has had a pretty good season with the ball. So he got a 7th in a first class game in June. And the reason why this performance meant something to me was that a member of the press pack said to me after he took his 7th, he said, "I bet you'll never do it again."
Name and shame.
I think we should name and shame.
The cricketer's Nick Friend. And I said, "I bet you'll get another 7th." We put a tenner on it, and I didn't expect to get the tenner within 3 months, but here we are. When I was first of all, obviously it's a pitch that's helping spin, but even so, if you have a look at his highlights, the ball that got Tom Wesley spun absolutely miles. Wesley leaves a ball way outside off stump that turns back in sharply and takes his off stump.
And who was the batter bowled, leaving alone? One that
I think it was
didn't
Walter.
turn? Yeah.
Walter, having seen what happened to Wesley, left one that just went on straight with the arm. It does mean that a couple of statistical quirks with De Care's. 14 of his first 19 first
now
class,
15 of 20.
Have come in 7 or 8ths, and he now has as many career 7ths as Graham Swan, which is quite a bizarre start to the career. And he only played this week because Jayant Yadav, Middlesex's overseas signing for the end of the season, couldn't play because of visa issues. So we wouldn't have got the chance to enjoy this performance. Just checking the Middlesex score now, that they're not doing well. They're 27 for 4. Jamie Porter's got 3. Sam Cook's got the other. Some sad news this week as one of Zimbabwe's finest ever cricketers, Heath Streak, passed away at the age of 49 following a battle with cancer. Streak is Zimbabwe's leading wicket taker in Test cricket and ODI cricket, and was a key part of the team that challenged the very best in the world in the late 90s and early 2000s. Phil, I have very fond memories of watching that Zimbabwe side. I had the 1999 World Cup video that I used to watch and repeat. And I think they finished 5th in that tournament. My favourite player was Neil Johnson, who was obviously the best player in the world in that tournament.
Made 130 at Lords, didn't he?
Yeah. But Phil, Streak was a real icon in that particular team, but also that era of cricket where Zimbabwe briefly did challenge the best teams in the world.
Yeah, he was probably their best quick at the time, captain for a while. Also, sort of shop steward as well. He was involved in a standoff with the board. There was all kinds of corruption in the board around the board, and players weren't being paid as well. And he fronted up on behalf of the players. This would have been in around 2004, I think, 2003-04. So yeah, bloke with a conscience as well, which is sort of sadly ironic because, of course, he was serving an 8-year ban at the time of his death. And I think while one shouldn't major on that, we shouldn't shy away from it either. And it's a desperately sad day, of course, for him, his family, and for Zimbabwean cricket, for whom he's indelibly linked and an icon of it. But we shouldn't just sideline these other questions as well.
I think we can acknowledge that in the game whilst also celebrating his worth as a cricket player and his significance around that time.
And just the numbers are, I feel like it's worth outlining again. I think he has more wickets in either Test or ODI cricket than any other Zimbabwe bowler has in the entirety of international cricket, which says something about just how far he is ahead of the rest. And also just a hair shy of 5,000 international runs. Like, it was a proper all-rounder as well. I mean, you'd say he's definitely Zimbabwe's greatest ever bowler, and you could argue their best ever all-rounder as well. I mean, that's a hell of a legacy to leave behind on the cricket field.
Phil, what's your moment of the week?
I read something in the Night Watchman. The Night Watchman's, the Wisden Quarterly, if you like, comes out every 3 months, and it's long-form writing. And it came out this week, and I was directed to a piece by the writer Richard Beard, who's a brilliant writer and a very fine, actually, old-school orthodox opening bat. Matinee idol good looks as well, but that's by the by. Anyway, he chanced upon a book written by Harold Pinter, the great playwright. And it's called The Catch, this book is called. And it's all of 266 words long.
Wait, sorry, words?
Words. Not pages, words. 266 words. Just let me give you the opening paragraph of it. Catch Me If You Can is the piece is called. Richard Beard savours every word. In 2003, a very short book, was published by Evergreen Press entitled The Catch. The book's only reviewer, Stephen Moss, in Bodyline Books, Catalogue of Cricket Literature, says it took him about a minute and a half to read. I'm not sure what took him so long. The main body of text amounts to 266 words, all of which I intend to quote in this piece, writes Richard, with additional commentary on the pauses, the Pinteresque pauses, of course. The Catch is a correspondence between, air quotes, Alan Wilkinson and playwright Harold Pinter. I'll give you some samples from the book. It's a Q&A. It's a back and forth between Alan Wilkinson, who may or may not be a real journalist, and Harold Pinter, who is definitely a real playwright. Who was the batsman, opposition number 3? How fast was the ball travelling? Quick. Did the ball touch the batsman's glove, or was it an outside edge? Outside edge. And it goes on like this. And slowly, although rather fast, over 266 acutely chosen words, it describes the catch, which relates to Pinter's own catch in some vague era in the early 70s when he's playing for Gaieties Cricket Club, which is a jazz hat team of which Pinter was captain for many, many years. And it's this, as Moss describes it, strange, unclassifiable artifact, this book. Harold Pinter, if you don't know too much about his work, then as Richard Beard puts it, in his plays From the Room in 1957 to Celebration in 2000, Pinter's stage characters cherish their personal myths, and there's no more Pinteresque character in Pinter than Harold Pinter on the cricket pitch. His dreams have not come true. His hero, Len Hutton, his highest score, 39, but he dreams them nonetheless while honing a curt line in dialogue for his fellow close fielders. The actor Stephen Mangan, who you'll know, Dan, making his debut for the Gaieties, remembers encouraging the opening bowler after the first ball of the match to be asked by Pinter, "Are you going to do that all day?" So it's full of these little vignettes, little details about a man's obsession with cricket, the hopeless addictions that the game brings about, and of course these moments, these little cherished moments where you may or may not have elevated your humdrum levels to a different plane, and this is what this 266-word book is about.
I'm impressed by the audacity to pitch a 266-word book. I'm not questioning its brilliance.
500 editions were printed. Rich got his hand on number 416 of 500. And over the next 3,000 words or so, unpicks the meaning behind every single part of this dialogue. He also may or may not finally track down the elusive Alan Wilkinson, the interviewer. But if you want to read the piece, and you should, because it's beautiful and mad, and that's cricket, then go and pick up a copy of it. Night Watchman, etc., etc.
It's funny because whenever you take a great catch, Phil, firstly, it doesn't normally take that many questions to get the story out of you, and also it normally comprises quite a lot more than 266 words.
The Asia Cup has been going on this week. Pakistan and India played against each other, although it was rained off at the halfway point after Shaheen, Naseem and Ralph were very good, taking all 10 wickets between them. Ben, just quickly on Pakistan, weird team. Amazing top four, 3 gun quicks and 4 sort of interchangeable spin bowling all-rounders in the middle of varying quality.
Yeah, but I think it works, basically. I think actually that middle order, I think it's a problem of plenty. I think they've kind of got all the bases covered if they want to. They've got Salman Ali Agha, he's a spin bowling rounder, but he's a batter, and he's shown in Test cricket to be very consistent. They've got even Saud Shakil now is just getting into that side, and again, brilliant start to his Test career, will be a consistent player there if they want to. Or they've got, Iftikhar Ahmed, who can whack it, but also is building up a properly imposing ODI record with the bat. Shadab Khan is obviously the banker in there, and he is the team balancer. He's brilliant, and he's kind of reached another level. He's a nail on starter. And then they actually also have some seam bowling rounders as well if they want, and Fahim Ashraf, even Mohammed Wasim Jr. if they want to go sort of slightly more to the bowling heavy side of it. So I think it's a really, really good team. I mean, even just setting aside obviously the 7 that they have, the 4 at the top, the 3 at the bottom, I think it's really good. The washout's funny. I think they might well have moved the venue for the next slated India-Pakistan game because it's the threat of the brain already. So they're just, but I mean, there's not much pretense that this tournament is built around getting India and Pakistan to play 2 or maybe 3 times.
Yeah, if they both get to the final, they get to play each other 3 times. Bangladesh going well in that tournament as well. Interesting for them is Mohammadi Hassan, the all-rounder, has been promoted up to the order. He's opening the batting now, and he's got 100 in his first game opening the batting. Bangladesh potentially dark horses for a semi-finals place. They finished second in the ODI Super League, and for the first time really have an established group of quicks. And although I think people make the mistake of lumping all Asian conditions together, they obviously have some advantage having played on conditions that are similar to what we'll see in India.
With one-word answers from the both of you, bearing in mind that you need to file your predictions for the magazine by the end of the day, please. Who's going to win it? You, Yas, first.
India.
You?
Yeah, India favourites, yeah.
What a useless answer. Are you saying India?
Sure, yeah, if I were betting on it.
One word, Ben.
India.
One word.
But yeah.
Phil?
Pakistan.
Oh yeah, we were talking this the other day. The image of Pakistan winning the World Cup in front of 100,000 people at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad would be maybe the best thing to ever happen in cricket.
Coming back to the Oval, that 20, whatever it was, 17?
Yeah.
Champs League final, Champs Trophy final. India were the only team in the tournament until the end, and Pakistan blew them away. And I can't shake that. It's imprinted on my brain.
Also, I think there's something about Pakistan that they are quite often the sole team responsible for making these tournaments entertaining. Like if everything goes to form, these tournaments can be potentially quite boring. But Pakistan just can beat or lose against any team, any day, despite whatever they did in the previous match. And I do feel like we're bubbling towards something special with Pakistan.
Yeah, because I guess the thing is that actually recently they haven't really been that team. Like they have, their lineup is very
even in the T20 World Cup where they got to
no,
the final,
sorry, yes, but I guess in ODI cricket, I feel like they have almost one of the most settled lineups in the world. I mean, that middle order, but they can kind of pick and choose basic conditions rather than not knowing what they've got there. And they have a batting lineup that is consistently getting big scores, and they're sort of adding sort of the finishes to get them up to the properly big scores. And they've got a bowling attack that can kind of defend anything. Like I think that, and like that's almost the Warriors, that it's going so good right now. Can it keep going this well for another sort of 2 months until that the business end of that World Cup? I guess it would be great if it did.
There's quite a funny moment yesterday when Gautam Gambhir, who was working as a broadcaster in the tournament, gave a middle finger to someone who was shouting at him. It looked like the crowd were, from the videos that were circulating on Twitter, it looked like the crowd were chanting Kohli's name at him, and those two famously don't get on very well, though Gambhir alleges that the chanting was something more political, and there are some people are suggesting that the video has been doctored, but whatever the reason, Gambhir wasn't the only right-wing politician to be caught doing a swear on camera yesterday. There's a good question on the Asia Cup from Callum. Given the success of the Asia Cup, why is there not a proposal for a similar tournament in Europe, given the competitiveness of the Netherlands and Scotland? England haven't played Scotland in any format in over 5 years, and they lost that game. It's an interesting question. I mean, part of the Asia Cup, we just talked about Pakistan versus India, but you also get India versus Nepal, Pakistan against Nepal. It's a chance for associates to play the big boys in a way they don't tend to. I guess, without having thought about it that much, it's a tournament that probably relies on those Pakistan versus India games and the broadcast money that comes from that sort of subsidises the rest, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout, actually. I think you'd struggle to make this thing, when obviously England will be playing on a different level to all the rest of them. And the Asia Cup benefits from having a mad population for the game anyway.
You have 5 of the 10 World Cup teams are in the Asia Cup.
Exactly. But a European Cup, including England, I think you'd struggle to get England to agree to it to begin with. It would be a lovely thing for them to do. It would be a necessarily selfless thing for them to do, in truth. But I think you'd struggle to get them to agree to it. I think you'd struggle to generate much marketing, sponsorship, TV revenue as well around it. It's a nice idea in theory. But I think it probably would remain that.
I suppose
I don't think it would be that much worse from a revenue point of view to some of the bilateral cricket that England already play, which already has second string teams being played. Over the last few years, England have played the Netherlands away. They're playing Ireland again this year. They played Ireland. England play Ireland quite a lot, actually. So I don't think it. Yeah, I can see how a short tournament could work.
Look, a sort of showpiece for a week or two, perhaps. But if it runs on any longer than that, then England would be saying thanks, but no thanks. We've got our own.
The Asia Cup's only 3 weeks long, all in. And I guess England, whether they do it they call it England Day or they just pick a second string team. I guess that would be how England could see the advantage if you get to blood sort of like the younger players, the next generation in what is international cricket in a tournament that might well build up some credibility, but that is also against, non-full member sides aside from Ireland. I think it's a really good idea. And I think people often underestimate cricket's ability to just be interesting if you put together a competition that has a certain amount of integrity, basically. Like 4-team tournaments are just more interesting than, 2-team series. And if you just make that into a thing, into a bit of a fixture, maybe it's once every 2 years, you get 4 teams up to, Malahide or the Grange or, Amstelveen or whatever to play 8 or how many T20 games would it be? Anyway, a certain amount of T20 games over, 10 days. I think that would make sense, and you can't be beyond the wit of man. But, I appreciate that there are, England have lots of things on their plate, and we're always talking about the schedule, and maybe we shouldn't also be then saying they should add this thing to the schedule, but it would be a nice thing.
Well, that is everything for today's show. Thanks a lot, Ben. Thanks, Phil. Listeners, thank you very much. If you're listening from London, you've got just under 48 hours to get yourself tickets for that live show. See you there.